This genius saved 14 million lives, so they clapped him. But why? It's 1951 in Manchester, England, and a man is sitting alone in a room. Another man comes in to disturb him. Then the man that was in the room first tells the other man to listen carefully to his story in order not to miss anything. So I guess we have to listen carefully as well. Then we hear on the radio that Alan Turing's home has been ransacked. Alan is the man that was sitting alone in the room. He continues talking to the man, telling him that he needs to commit to listening closely to his story without judgment. If the man cannot make the commitment, he can leave the room. But if he does, whatever happens is his responsibility, not Alan's. As Alan is saying this, an important man in a large office receives information that Alan has been robbed. Now it's raining and a couple of law enforcement officials are looking through Alan's house that was just robbed. They find Alan in a room and try to talk to him, but he tells them to leave the room and not breathe heavily. They don't listen, but then he turns around, and it looks like he knows one of the two men. The man that he doesn't know is not interested in catching up. He goes straight to the point, wanting to discuss the break-in. Apparently it was a break-in, not a robbery as initially suspected, because nothing was stolen. Alan tells them that they wouldn't be able to find the person that broke in, even if the person came and spat in their faces. He tells them to, instead, file the reports and leave him to clean. The familiar man, Detective Knock, agrees, but when they go outside he tells the other guy, Sergeant Stale, that Alan was behaving suspiciously and is hiding something. Stale doesn't believe it, so maybe Alan was right about the spit in the face thing. Now it's 1939 in London. A slightly younger Alan is making his way through a mass of humans at the train station. As he's doing this, we hear on the news that England is now officially at war with Germany. Alan takes the train to Bletchley Radio Manufacturing, and he meets with the important man there who is surprised that Alan is in his office. Apparently the secretary asked him to wait, and Alan decided to wait in the important man's office. Alan and the man, Commander Alistair Denniston, engage in a quick banter. The takeaways are, Denniston thinks Alan is a prodigy, but Alan doesn't consider himself one. Denniston loves jokes, but Alan doesn't understand what those are. And yes, Alan is here to get a job. We also find out that Alan is not concerned about the royal majesty, but he considers himself the best mathematician in the world. Commander Denniston tells him that the agency recently fired one of the greatest linguists in the country who is a really good German speaker. Alan chooses this moment to tell the commander that he doesn't speak German, even though he is interviewing for the role of German code interpreter. The commander asks him then why he thinks he is qualified for the role, and he tells the commander that he is really good at crossword puzzles. The commander has heard enough, so he calls for a secretary, probably to throw Alan out. Meanwhile, Alan is trying to defend his extraordinary puzzle-solving skills. But just as the secretary arrives, Alan mentions one word that changes everything: enigma. It's so life-changing that the commander shuts the door in his secretary's face to listen to what Alan has to say. Enigma is an encryption device that the Germans have been using to encode their messages, and the English have been trying to figure that out. Enter Alan and his top-tier puzzle-solving skills. Alan doesn't really care about the war. He's more interested in solving the most difficult puzzle in the world. The commander tells him that it is impossible to solve, but Alan wants to try anyway. Looks like he got the job. We finally get to see the Enigma machine, and it looks like a weird typewriter, but Alan thinks it's beautiful. I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There are other guys aside from Alan and the commander, standing in the presence of Enigma. One of them doesn't understand why the machine cannot do the decoding. I don't understand either. Alan and the commander seem to be the only ones that do, because Alan mentions that it's not that easy. The commander graciously explains to us, apparently to decode messages on the machine, you need to know the machine's settings. Unfortunately for them, the Germans switch settings every day at midnight. Worse still, the English intercept the messages at 6 AM every day, which means they only have 18 hours to figure out the setting in order to decode the message, and nobody has been smart enough to do it. Alan is not the only guy that is good at games. The commander introduces everyone to Hugh Alexander, who will be heading the team. He won America's chess championship twice. Alan is not excited about the possibility of working with people, because they will slow him down. He wants his own office. The commander refuses, and so does another man that we are introduced to. It's Stuart Menzies, from MI6, a government division that should not exist. The commander and Menzies leave the room, and the other guys get cracking on Enigma. They tried really hard, but they needed to crack 20 million years worth of information in 20 minutes. They are basically set up for failure. Alan finds a way to work on his own and anger everyone at the same time, but he's just misunderstood. He's just like me, for real for real. Anyway, he works tirelessly to come up with a solution to cracking 20 million years worth of information in 20 minutes. Then he goes on runs in the evenings. Soon his wall at the workshop is filled with papers, and then it's 1951 again. Detective Knock is on the phone and he's not happy with the person on the other end of the line, telling him that Alan's military records are classified, so he does something shady. We don't find out the result of that just yet because we are taken back to 1939. Alan has come to report to the commander that Alexander denied his requisition for the things that he needs to build a machine that he believes will decode the German messages. The commander tells him that his teammates have filed a formal complaint against him, refusing to work with him. If Alan does not respond to the complaints, the commander will take it up with the Home Office. Alan's response is that his teammates are idiots and need to be fired. What they would have been paid could be used to fund his machine. After all, he only needs about $100,000. The commander is quite shocked at his audacity, but he still bothers to ask Alan why he is building a machine. Alan tells him that it's too technical, he won't understand, but the commander tells him to try anyway. Apparently the reason he is building a machine is because he believes that a machine is the only thing that can defeat a machine. That's not technical at all, and the commander agrees. Alan shouldn't have bothered explaining though, because the commander still refuses to fund the machine. Why? Well, Alan's commanding officer, Alexander, has said no, and so Alan must obey. That's the way of the military. Alan learns fast. He goes straight to the commander's own direct commanding officer, Winston Churchill. Well, really, he sends a letter to him via Menzies, the MI6 guy, and that's how Alan becomes the head of the code cracking squad. He quickly fires 2 guys, which does nothing to endear him to the others. Menzies sarcastically tells him that he must have been popular at school, and that sends him back to 1928 when he was a young schoolboy, with no riz. We find out that he was severely bullied in secondary school. One of the boys dumped food on him, and at another time, a couple of the boys practically buried him under the ground. But there was a nice boy. Christopher rescues him and tells him that the other boys bully him because he is different. And then it's back to 1939. After firing 2 of his teammates, Alan decides to put up a crossword puzzle in the papers to hire new members. Whoever is able to figure out the puzzle would get employed. So the British work hard at the puzzles, while the Germans work hard at bombing. The successful puzzle solvers are called to a room. Most of them are men, but there's one woman. A quality moment. The man in the door doesn't believe that she solved the puzzle herself. He's standing at the door though, not sitting. So he also did not solve the puzzle. Alan tells her to take a seat amongst the other candidates. The candidates are given a task to complete in 6 minutes. Alan says he was able to complete it in 8 minutes. The lady completes it in 5 minutes and 34 seconds. She and another guy get the job, and by way of induction, they are told that they could be executed if they tell their friends and families the truth about their job. Sounds like a dream job. Now we're back to seeing schoolboy Alan. He's sitting with Christopher, who's reading a book on cryptography, the original crypto bro. Christopher explains to Alan that cryptography allows you to send messages that anybody can read without knowing what they mean, unless one has the key. So Alan asks him how that is different from talking. After all, people say things that they don't mean. You're expected to just know what they mean. I've been asking this same question for years. Anyway, Christopher decides that Alan could be good at cryptography, so he hands over the book to him. Maybe I need to take it up myself too. They bid each other goodnight, and Alan almost confesses his love for Christopher. Now it's 1940 and there's a machine being built. Next we see Alan at the ladies, Joan Clark's, house. Apparently she's supposed to live with the other cryptographers throughout the code cracking period, but when he tells her to go get ready, she tells him that she's not interested in the offer. Her parents are in the other room and can hear the entire conversation. He reminds her that she made 2 firsts in mathematics. She quickly mentions that that wasn't even enough for them to make her a fellow, but it's all good because she's not interested in the job anyway. We finally get to the main issue. She can't go because she'll be living with other men, and living with other men would be sussy. Alan quickly figures that her parents, who are still in the other room, are the reason behind her refusal, so he suggests loudly that she could live and work with the young ladies, who intercept the messages. He really lays it on thick for the parents' benefit. The parents must have bought it because we see Joan walk out to the door and things seem okay. Then she asks him why he is helping her. He replies with something that Christopher once told him. Sometimes it's the very people who no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine. Now we're back in 1951. Detective Knock has gotten his hands on Alan's classified records. It's just a blank paper. His conclusion is that Alan must have been a spy, and he convinces his boss to get curious. Back in 1940, Joan gets off the bus with a group of ladies. Then she sees Alan across the road. They stare at each other like it's the beginning of a love story. The code crackers desperately continue to try to crack the Germans' messages. Meanwhile, the British were starving because the Germans kept intercepting their food supply, so the pressure was really on to crack the codes. Tempers are high because it's been another failed day. They believe that Alan is the reason they haven't been making progress, because he has been focused on building his machine. So Alexander tries to break the machine, which is still under construction, but the other guys restrain him. At night, Alan steals a document and goes on a rendezvous to Joan's room. To make things seem even more romantic, he climbs in through the window, but they're just here for code cracking business, not back cracking business. Sounds like the machine, named Christopher, is almost ready, but they need to find a clue in the messages to feed into the machine. The machine is supposed to be a universal machine that can be programmed and reprogrammed to solve anything, just like a digital computer. The next day, Alan arrives at the office to find it being searched and his teammates standing by. He's informed that one of them is a double agent, and that he fits the bill because he is an orphan and a loner. Wow. They don't find anything in his office, but the commander, who sanctioned the search, is looking forward to Alan getting hanged for treason. He gets to work on his machine and Joan comes visiting. She bears good news. They go out to a pub to share the good news, but they run into Alan's teammates. Alexander comes over and makes small talk with Joan. Alan is surprised at how quickly she got Alexander to like her, so she gives him a piece of advice. He needs the help of his teammates because he can't crack Enigma on his own. His teammates will not help him because they don't like him, so he starts making an effort to get them to like him. He buys them apples, and then tells them a joke. His teammates try to laugh, and it takes him back to his school days when he was exchanging encoded notes with Christopher in class. He decodes the note and it reads, "See you in 2 long weeks, dearest friend." This makes him smile. Now it's 1941 and they are still trying to crack codes, but his teammates like him now. The machine is finally ready. It makes a really loud noise and runs for a really long time with no result. The commander gets wind of this. He orders the machine to be turned off. He also fires Alan, but his teammates starting to quit if Alan is fired because they believe that the machine is the best chance that they have. Kinda shed a tear at that. Alexander then tells the commander to give them 6 months to produce the results of the machine. If nothing pans out, they'll go back to doing things the old way. The commander gives them 1 month, and if they have no results by then, they're fired. They decide to de-stress at a pub. At the pub, Alan tells Alexander that he is not the spy. Alexander agrees because apparently, the code that the spy used was too uncomplicated for Alan. Back in 1951, Sergeant Stale just found out what Alan was supposedly hiding. He's not a spy. He's fruity, meaning he likes the company of men. Based. Detective Knott can't believe that he has been chasing something that unimportant, but Sergeant Stale is just happy that they can charge Alan with something. Unfortunately, being that way was unlawful back in the day. The detective, however, asks his superior officer to allow him to interrogate Alan. It's 1941 and Joan just came to tell Alan that she's quitting. Her parents are not happy that she's unmarried and living alone at 25, so they want her home, even though she probably stands a better chance at meeting someone in a workplace that is full of men. But what do I know? Alan tells her that he won't let her quit, but she tells him that she can't give up her parents. He tells her that she has an opportunity to make something useful of her life, but she tells him that she would rather not, if it would mean ending up like him. She throws in some more insults, so Alan decides to change tactics. He tells her that he doesn't want her to leave because he likes her and likes talking to her. This gets her smiling, and she tells him that she likes talking to him too. So he asks her whether she would change her mind if she had a husband. Then he makes a ring out of wire and goes down on one knee. That night, they go off to celebrate. Joan shows off her ring to the girls while Alan has a riveting conversation with the boys. Everybody eventually goes off to dance, and it's just Alan and John left at the table. He tries to ask John for some sussy advice, but John already knows that Alan likes guys, and he tells him that. Alan asks John whether he should tell Joan that he has had affairs with men, but John tells him that it would be in his best interest not to. Now we're back to schoolboy Alan, and he's writing an "I love you" note in code. He intends to give it to Christopher as the boys come back to school from holidays, but Christopher does not come back. It's 1951 again, and Detective Knock is interrogating Alan. Well, if asking him whether machines can think like humans count as interrogation. Alan first mentions how stupid the question is, and then goes on to explain how machines think, but think differently from humans, just like how humans think differently from one another. The detective asks Alan what he did during the war. He replies that he worked in a radio factory. The detective asks him what he really did during the war. He asks the detective whether he is paying attention. Then we're back to the code crackers working on the machine. The machine is still not fast enough and everybody is frustrated, but nobody's throwing anything this time around. They go to the pub to unwind and the ladies are sitting separate from the gents. Joan's friend and Alexander flirt, and everyone forces Alan to play matchmaker, but the friend mentions something about intercepting messages from the same German, and it gets Alan thinking, so he calls her back to ask for details even after she went off with Alexander. The details she gives is enough to get him running back to the office, and the other guys plus his fiancée run after him. They say a lot of smart things, but the bottom line is that they figure out how to get the machine to work, and in no time at all it does. Finally, they're able to decrypt their first message. Everybody hugs, but there's just one guy standing there with no one to hug. He gets his hug eventually though. They keep cracking codes throughout the night, and finally they find information that could save hundreds of people on a ship. But just as Alexander is about to call the commander to get him to do something, Alan forces him not to. Alexander hits him for that, but Alan tries to explain that they can't always do what feels good. Sometimes they just have to do what feels logical. If they make use of the information they have, the Germans will know that they have broken Enigma, and they would change the design of Enigma very quickly. So basically they have to pick their battles. Unfortunately, the brother of one of the code crackers, Peter Hilton, is on the ship, but Alan insists that they can't save this one, and everyone aside from Peter tearfully agrees. Alan and Joan meet up with Menzies. They tell him that they have broken Enigma, but they need him to help them to hide the secret, even from the commander. Alan tells them that they need time to determine, statistically, the minimal number of actions that they can take to win the war, and the maximum they can take before the Germans get suspicious. They don't only need him to help them cover up the secret though, they also need him to come up with a lie that they can sell to everybody. He's an MI6 agent though, so he's used to this. The decryption project is codenamed Ultra, and everyone works hard to keep the secret, but Peter is understandably still not happy. He bumps into Alan as he makes his way out the door, but as Alan stoops to gather his stuff from the floor, he sees a Bible on John's desk. Remember the spy that the commander was on the hunt for? Well, it was found out that the person encoded the message that they sent out using a verse from the Bible, so you know what that means. John tries to convince Alan that they are on the same side with the Soviets, who he is spying for, but Alan says he has to tell. John threatens to leak Alan's sussy secret if Alan leaks his spy secret. Alan tries to tell anyway. He puts a call across to Menzies but ends up not going through with it. On getting home, he finds Menzies in his house. Alan asks where Joan is, and he is told that she is in military prison. Why? She's being suspected to be the spy, because they found some decoded Enigma intercepts in their house. Obviously, Alan decides to tell him who the spy is. Menzies tells him that he wishes Alan was a spy, because he would be so much better at it than John is. Menzies knew that John was a double agent even before he joined the team, and he allowed John to join the team because of that. Apparently, he has been feeding John with false intel, which John has been unknowingly passing on to the Soviets. Now Menzies needs Alan's help. He wants Alan to tell him what other information is safe to be released to John and the Soviets. Alan says he'll only do it if he promises to release Joan, but there's no need for that because Joan is at the market, not a prison cell. However, a prison cell or even worse is still possible for Joan if Alan does not comply. Alan decides to protect Joan and tell her to run away. She refuses, so he tells her that he's secretly very fruity. She tells him that she always had her suspicions, but they love each other in their own way, and they can make it work. He tells her that he doesn't care for her and he never did. Based. He just needed her to break Enigma. She hits him in the face and insists that she's not going anywhere. She tells him that the work she's doing on Enigma is the most important work that she'll ever do, and she's done caring what anyone thinks. She also tells him that everyone was right about him, that he's a monster. Work continued on Enigma for 2 years. The codecrackers determined who died, and who lived and nobody knew, aside from the codecrackers and Menzies. Even the invasion of Normandy was thanks to the intelligence that the codecrackers supplied. Meanwhile, Alan continued to run in the evening. As you already know, the British won the war, and the codecrackers were asked to burn the entire Enigma project. They now have to forget about everything and pretend like they never knew one another, or heard of Enigma. So the Alan-John relationship wouldn't have worked anyway. Now we're back in the interrogation room from the start of the movie, and Alan just finished narrating this entire story to the other man in the room. The other man being Detective Knock. He asks the detective to tell him what he is based on the story that he just heard. A man, a machine, a war hero, or a criminal. The detective says that he can't judge him. Alan says the detective is of no use to him, and then goes down memory lane to when he was a schoolboy. He has just been called into the headmaster's office, and he's informed by the principal that Christopher is dead. Apparently, he had been battling bovine tuberculosis for a while. Alan refuses to cry and asks to be excused instead. Back to the present, it looks like Alan did not destroy the machine, and then we find out in the papers that he was sentenced for indecency, which is olden days speak for being a rainbow. Sometime later, Joan visits him in his house. He's looking a bit rough around the edges. She tells him that she would have testified for him, but he basically says it wouldn't have made a difference. He's not looking well at all though. His hands are even shaky and he drops a glass. So Joan asks what's wrong, and we find out that the judge offered him 2 sentence options. He could either do 2 years in jail or go for hormone therapy, which is judge speak for chemical castration. He chose the latter because he wouldn't have been able to work in prison. Joan tries to help, but Alan says he doesn't need any help. She tells him that he doesn't have to do this alone, but he tells her that he's never been alone while looking at Christopher, the machine. He also tells her that if he doesn't continue with the medication, they'll take Christopher away from him. He breaks down and she comforts him. That's how we find out that Joan is now engaged or married to a soldier that she works with. Also, Alan can't do crossword puzzles anymore. He asks her whether she got the normal life that she always wanted, and she launches into a story of places, people, and things that wouldn't exist right now if not for him. We go back in time one last time to see the codecrackers burning all their papers. They seem happy, but there's a short epilogue that tells us that Alan committed self-deletion after a year of government-mandated hormone therapy. He was just 41 years old. In case you haven't guessed, this is based on a true life story, and Turing's machine is what inspired the modern-day computer. Moral of the story? Damn, people were messed up back in the day.